30 minutes after exposure to a lethal dose of ionizing radiation, the average human being feels entirely normal. No pain, no visible injury, no immediate signal from any biological system that anything has gone wrong. You are walking, thinking, making decisions, helping other people, possibly running, possibly opening doors and touching surfaces and breathing unfiltered air. And your body is providing zero useful feedback about any of it. The damage is already done. The cellular machinery is already compromised. The outcome, in the absence of immediate medical intervention that does not exist in a civilian nuclear scenario, is already largely determined. And you feel fine. This is not a flaw in your biology. It is a precise description of how ionizing radiation interacts with human tissue, and understanding it is the difference between making decisions in the first hour that preserve some probability of survival and making decisions that eliminate it entirely. Your body is not your ally in a nuclear event. Your body is a confidence machine running on inputs that ionizing radiation does not activate. The sensors that evolution built, pain receptors, nausea triggers, vision, proprioception, none of them detect gamma radiation. None of them detect alpha particles entering lung tissue. None of them detect cesium-137 depositing in muscle. You are effectively blind to the primary threat in your environment, and the blindness feels exactly like safety. Let us start at the cellular level, because that is where the betrayal begins. Ionizing radiation damages DNA through two primary mechanisms. Direct ionization, where the radiation particle physically strikes a DNA strand and breaks it, and indirect ionization, where the radiation interacts with water molecules in the cell, and the human body is approximately 60% water, producing free radicals that then attack the DNA. Both mechanisms produce strand breaks. Single-strand breaks, which the cell can usually repair. Double-strand breaks, where both sides of the DNA helix are severed simultaneously, which the cell often cannot repair correctly. At sufficient doses, the number of double-strand breaks overwhelms the cell's repair capacity. The cell either dies or begins replicating incorrectly. You feel none of this. There are no pain receptors in the nucleus of a cell. There is no signal cascade that reaches your conscious awareness in the first 30 minutes. The damage accumulates in complete silence, below the threshold of every biological warning system you possess. The 15-minute window after detonation is where the cellular damage that will define your medical outcome is being written. Every second spent outside in fallout, every breath of contaminated air, every surface touched and then brought to the face, each one is adding to a total that your body is not reporting. The instinct to run, to help others, to assess the situation, to look for family members. These are all behaviors that extend your exposure time in the highest intensity period of the fallout event. Your social instincts, your protective instincts, your survival instincts, all of them are running on a nervous system that cannot perceive the threat they are exposing you to. You are not ignoring the danger. You genuinely cannot feel it. The distinction matters because it means the correct behavior, immediate sheltering, no exceptions, must be a preloaded decision. It cannot be a response to symptoms because by the time symptoms arrive, the exposure that caused them is already historical. If you want your threat model to keep updating, subscribe now. The algorithm rewards the living. Acute radiation syndrome is a precisely staged biological process, and the staging is where the betrayal becomes most dangerous. The prodromal phase begins within minutes to hours of high-dose exposure. Nausea, vomiting, fatigue, headache, possibly fever. This phase is the body's initial inflammatory response to massive cellular injury. It is also the phase that most survivors dismiss. In a post-nuclear environment, nausea has many possible explanations. Stress, dehydration, contaminated food or water, the psychological shock of the event. The prodromal phase is easily rationalized away. People who should be lying still and conserving immune resources are instead moving, working, helping others, interpreting their nausea as a stress response rather than a biological emergency signal. Then comes the latent phase. The prodromal symptoms resolve. The person feels better, sometimes dramatically, sometimes described by Hiroshima survivors as a return to near-normal function. This is the most lethal phase of acute radiation syndrome from a behavioral standpoint. The improvement is not recovery. It is the eye of a biological storm. The bone marrow, which was heavily irradiated, is failing silently. White blood cell counts are dropping toward zero. The immune system is in the process of catastrophic collapse. The person who feels better is a person whose body has temporarily stopped generating the signals of distress while the underlying failure accelerates. They use this window to move, to search for help, to explore the environment, to consume whatever food and water is available. They increase their total exposure. They deplete the immune reserves they will desperately need in the manifest illness phase. The latent phase is the radiation event's most efficient kill mechanism, and it is built entirely out of your own biology working against you. The manifest illness phase arrives without warning. Infection, hemorrhage, hair loss, severe gastrointestinal damage. The immune system, having failed quietly during the latent phase, is now absent. Bacteria that the body manages without incident under normal conditions become fatal. Wounds that would normally clot do not clot. The gut lining, which turns over rapidly and is therefore highly sensitive to radiation damage, begins to break down. There is no field treatment for any of this. The first aid kit addresses none of it. The iodine tablet addresses none of it. The mylar blanket addresses none of it. The manifest illness phase in a civilian nuclear scenario without access to bone marrow transplant facilities and broad-spectrum IV antibiotics is where the outcome written in the first 15 minutes is delivered. Hiroshima documents this with clinical precision. Survivors who felt well enough to help others in the first hours, who moved through the contaminated city searching for family members, who consumed water from compromised sources. These individuals accumulated secondary exposures on top of their initial dose that pushed borderline survivable cases into fatal territory. The latent phase made them functional. The manifest illness phase collected the debt. The historical record is unambiguous. The people who survived in the highest numbers were those who sheltered earliest and moved least in the first 48 hours. Not because they felt worse, because they understood that feeling was not data. Now, the carbon monoxide. Because the biological betrayal does not stop with radiation. Your shelter, if you sealed it correctly to reduce radiation ingress, is now accumulating carbon monoxide from any combustion source inside it. Candles, camping stoves, generators. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin at 250 times the affinity of oxygen. The symptoms of early CO poisoning, headache, mild nausea, fatigue, are identical to the prodromal symptoms of acute radiation syndrome. You cannot distinguish between them without a CO detector, which your kit probably does not contain. You may be treating radiation sickness symptoms while simultaneously being poisoned by your shelter atmosphere, with no biological signal capable of telling you which problem is primary or whether both are operating simultaneously. Your body is now actively deceiving you about two separate kill mechanisms using the same set of symptoms, and you have no instrument capable of separating the signal. The rule of sevens offers you the only honest timeline in this scenario. Radiation intensity drops by a factor of 10 for every seven-fold increase in time after detonation. 7 hours, 49 hours, 343 hours. The decay curve does not care about your symptoms. It does not accelerate because you feel ill or slow down because you feel well. It runs on physics, while your biology runs on evolutionary heuristics that were not designed for this environment. The rule of sevens is the only feedback system in your immediate vicinity that is not lying to you. A Geiger counter is the instrument that lets you read it. Everything else, your nausea, your fatigue, your headache, your temporary improvement, is a biological narrative that the radiation event is writing for its own purposes. What does correct behavior look like when you cannot trust your body? It looks like a protocol. It looks like pre-committed decisions made before the event, executed without reference to how you feel in the moment. Shelter immediately at the 15-minute mark, regardless of how you feel. Stay for 48 hours minimum, regardless of how you feel at hour 4. Do not interpret symptom improvement as recovery. Log Geiger readings at regular intervals and compare them to the rule of sevens curve, rather than to your subjective sense of safety. Eliminate combustion sources in the shelter and maintain a ventilation gap. Treat nausea and fatigue as exposure indicators, not stress responses, and reduce activity accordingly to conserve immune function. Make no decisions based on the absence of symptoms, because absence of symptoms is the primary clinical feature of lethal radiation exposure in its most dangerous phase. Your body has been your most reliable instrument for your entire life. In a nuclear event, it is a malfunctioning sensor running on inputs that the threat does not generate. It will tell you that you are fine when you are not. It will tell you that you are recovering when you are failing. It will tell you that the worst is over at precisely the moment the worst is beginning. Physics does not have a nervous system. It does not send reassuring signals. It does not have a latent phase where it appears to relent. It simply continues. The only response to a system that does not communicate is to stop listening for communication and start measuring. Like this video if your body just became less trustworthy. Subscribe if you want to know what else is lying to you. The next variable is already in motion. Your biology is not your enemy. It is simply optimized for a different problem. The problem in front of you requires different instruments.